The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Welcome, Hoop Ball faithful, and happy Halloween. This is the box score breakdown for Halloween, October 31st, 2019. If you couldn't tell from that intro, I am your host, JC DeLeon. With me, just like last week, is Alan Strokey. How you doing, Alan?
Doing pretty well, JC. Hoping you're having a good night.
Yeah, good night so far. No major Halloween plans. Just, keeping it relaxed.
Same here. I think I've got a horror movie on in the background right now. That's where the fam's up to.
Oh,
So
nice. Which movie?
hopefully that. I think they're watching The Purge. I'm not sure which Purge. I know there's like 5 Purges and a Purge TV show that has started up recently. So one of the hours of catalog Purge content is going on in there.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely the vibe. And down here in Atlanta, I'm not sure how things are on your end, but a lot of wind, a lot of just terrible weather. It couldn't be a worse night to be a kid trying to trick or treat, I imagine.
Yeah, it's pretty cold in Austin. It's like 38 degrees right now. So I'd imagine that kept a lot of trick-or-treaters away. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good night to cozy up with some coffee. This podcast, like all the others on Hoop Ball, is brought to you by our title sponsor, Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. You can check out their website at hawaiianisles.com or on Amazon by searching for Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee, or on Twitter at HI Kona Coffee. That's Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. So yeah, the box score breakdown, there being only 3 games tonight, kind of unfortunate for us. However, there is a ton of news that broke last night. Last night was a really odd night for the NBA. There was a huge fight, major injury that has huge implications beyond fantasy for one, I guess you can now say, former elite team. So let's jump right into that. So yeah, the biggest news yesterday, I think despite the injury, the suspensions might be the bigger news. So Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid got into a bit of a kerfuffle last night. It's a bit like one of those regular NBA fights. They're attempted to be punches swung, nothing
A
really
lot,
connected.
a lot of hold me back, mans. Like
Yeah,
let
yeah,
me if you left me 2 more minutes, it really would have gotten ugly, sort of deal. Yeah.
I think that's the way all those are. It's like if nobody happens to be there to break them up, they have the potential to be really ugly. Ben Simmons tried to be smooth and pretend he was a peacemaker and had Karl Anthony Towns in a chokehold.
Chokehold of justice right there.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I guess it's good that they're an East Coast versus West Coast team because they're only gonna play each other one more time this season.
It
So
is it is a pretty interesting rivalry, with like, you don't really see 2 big guys getting into it when you see these NBA fights. At least I don't, it's been a while since I can remember the last time. And with Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns, you're getting probably the 2 best centers in the NBA. Apologies to Nikola Jokic. It's very interesting that both of those 2 would be involved, and the implications for their teams. It differs quite strongly here.
yeah, and it's always weird in general, just because like one of the more iconic NBA fights I can remember is Charles versus Shaq when Charles
Yeah,
threw the ball at his head.
that's the
Well,
one
like
I was thinking of too.
yeah, like they've since revealed that like that night, like it's just the heat of competition. Like that night they had dinner after the game. So like usually stuff like that isn't a big deal, but like this appears to be a big deal. Like they genuinely do not like each other, and like you got to
Some
figure,
ugliness.
yeah, you got to figure they're going to spend some time. Like they're both going to be all stars, and so what's that going to
Mhm.
be like?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's something to look forward to down the road. But the fallout of that fight, they have both Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns have been suspended for 2 games each. So yeah, I'd imagine that affects both head-to-head and roto
Hmm.
type leagues.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you own either one of those 2 guys, I mean, if you're in head to head, this week is pretty much a wash for you. This matchup is probably not going the way you would have hoped. And if you have Steph Curry, well, I mean, there's no reason you'd have Steph Curry with those two. But, another guy, you're probably in a bad mood in your head-to-head league. But, you can get around that with Roto, with, your ability to just sort of put guys in and out throughout a season-long sort of deal here. So, hopefully for those of you who have investments in Joel Embiid, maybe you were able to draft Al Horford along with him, because that guy is about to absorb the majority of those starters minutes, and he's going to have a great rest of the week playing starting center for that Philadelphia 76ers team.
Yeah, I think Joel Embiid's already had one game of rest, and I think or a minutes restriction, and yeah, Al Horford had a pretty big night that night. Mm-hmm. Who do you see benefiting from the Timberwolves lineup?
So the Timberwolves is kind of a trickier one. We saw a mix of guys sort of getting in there after Karl Towns went out. Noah Vonleh, got some playing time in that game, and Gorgie Dang. Actually, did Dang get into that game? Let me take a look. No. Noah Vonleh, actually, his minutes did not go up following Karl Anthony Towns exiting that one, while Gorgie Dang also didn't see the floor. So it's going to be a lot of Jordan Bell, it looks like. I apologize. I wasn't quite sure how the fallout from that one went. Taking a look here. He got 12. Jordan Bell saw 12 minutes on the floor for that one. It was very uneventful. 5 points, 4 rebounds, no defensive stats. It's unclear if he's going to be named the starter for their next game. It seems like either he or Jang would be the leading candidates to do so. I won't know if either one of them are really worth a streaming ad through the rest of this 2-game suspension. Maybe Jang, just because we've seen it happen in the past, but it's been so long since he's been relevant in fantasy leagues that I'm not sure, what we're going to see out of that.
And Jordan Bell's another one you mentioned that was interesting. Like I feel like he had so much potential in his rookie year, being kind of one of those undersized bigs that could still manage to get a lot of stats, and he's just, that dude's regressed like big time. He just hasn't really done anything in his career.
No, really not. I mean, what you hope from him is that he can just be your shot blocker and sort of just kind of hold down. But he just never really added to the game besides the athleticism. It's just he. There's a reason that Golden State wasn't very keen on keeping him, and you can see with all their problems with in the middle right now on that team. Before the whole Steph Curry thing, they were struggling to find a guy that they could start at center on a given night. So I think it's telling that they didn't even attempt to get Jordan Bell back in the door there.
Yeah, for sure. So we've mentioned Steph Curry a couple of times, and so the other big news that came out of last night, really devastating injury to the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry took a nasty fall and broke his left hand. And it's interesting because a broken hand you think might not really be that impactful, but I mean, he is a ball handling guard who uses both of his hands really well. The last report I saw that they're getting a CT scan for a more detailed look at the injury to really fully know how long he's going to be out. So even still, they don't quite know. They might know tomorrow. I've seen as long as 8 to 10 weeks. 8 to 10 weeks is going to be mid-January, and the Warriors really don't have a lot going for them right now, and so you got to figure by mid-January the season's going to be pretty much over by that point anyways. Some are speculating that he may be shut down for the season, which I don't quite see, but I mean, it's a possibility, I suppose.
He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that throw in the towel that way. I mean, the Warriors over the years have just, I don't know. They a lot of people have been counting them out before this whole Curry injury happened, and I don't know if he'd feel comfortable just sort of sitting the rest of it out and just kind of have the end of the Warriors dynasty be what the thing that's on everyone's minds, especially if he's able to get back into the game by January. I know it's probably not likely that they'll be in the playoff chase by then, but if you get a couple more bodies back in the form of Willie Cauley-Stein and Kevon Looney, and maybe D'Angelo Russell settles into the sort of run that he had when he was handling the point in Brooklyn, if he sort of replicates that in Golden State, there could be a salvageable product here. Of course, it won't be anything that we've seen out of this team, but maybe it could be enough to keep them close to a playoff spot.
Yeah, and one of the other thoughts I had, and just because I had forgotten, so I thought, like right away, I was like, man, is Brooklyn going to end up with Golden State's pick, like after all that's happened? But because of the trade with D'Angelo Russell, but the Warriors were savvy enough that pick is top 20 protected, and so if they get a lottery pick, the Warriors will still keep it. And some people are kind of looking at the Spurs as an example when they got Tim Duncan, but I mean the problem with that is there's no Tim Duncan in college basketball.
No,
so that's not really a route that'll keep the Warriors dominant for years to come. The way Spurs just kind of lucked into Tim Duncan.
Yeah. Definitely not going to see that sort of situation. But you get Steph Curry back, you get Klay Thompson back, you get Draymond Green's back in the fold. You have that core in place, and you add maybe a lottery type rookie into the mix there. Maybe give you some depth, which the Warriors haven't really had in a couple of seasons. That could go a long way.
Yeah, but it's funny the overreactions I've seen. Like I've seen people like saying like they should cut bait on everything and like trade Steph to Charlotte and just like start completely over. And I'm like, they don't need to do that.
Yeah,
you've got Steph locked up, you've got Draymond locked up, you've got Klay locked up. Like just like focus on that.
So I mean, it's a fantastic way to lose your job after winning a few championships to trade away a Hall of Fame guy in Steph Curry just because the climb back might be a little too hard. Yeah, I agree with you. There's no chance of that. I guess before we leave this subject, in terms of the fantasy value that is going to fill in this giant gaping hole left on the team, I think a lot of people have been looking at Alec Burks as the main pickup here. But I might personally, I've been pushing the brakes on that a little bit just because I think that Burks is going to actually have to play a ton of point guard minutes for this team as a backup. They up until Steph Curry's injury, Jacob Evans, who's out with an adductor strain right now, he had been holding down the backup point guard minutes, and that's not necessarily his natural position. Burks is a little bit closer to it. He's been kind of a combo two-way kind of guard. So I think that he's going to be backing up D'Angelo Russell a lot here, which will open up a lot of minutes at shooting guard where Russell was kind of taking the bulk of playing time. So in that respect, I think maybe a guy like rookie Jordan Poole, who has not been afraid to let some shots fly, I think he's going to get an extended look. Damian Lee's only on a two-way contract, so he can only play so much, but he's probably going to get some more looks. There's not really a great ad when you look at all of those guys right there. But if I were to bank on, maybe seeing what any of these guys got, Jordan Poole is an interesting name.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at their roster on Basketball Reference. Like they've got a lot of SGs. They only have one other PG, and that's Kai Bowman.
Yeah, and Kai Bowman, he got 12 minutes in that game and wasn't terrible in them, but I can't see him giving you much more than that on more than 12 minutes on a night-to-night basis.
Yeah. So the other big injury news, Miles Turner, he went down with a non-contact injury, which is always really concerning news. And I happened to tune in when he watched it. He was just kind of running, and it was non-contact. He just sort of buckled and was holding his ankle. He kind of buckled in the way that sometimes a player who ruptures his Achilles buckles, and I was worried about that, but he was holding his ankle area. And I'm like, what in the hell happened? Today he was diagnosed with a sprained ankle. I don't see how he sprained it, but that's what he is. He wasn't given an official day-to-day diagnosis. He was given a week-to-week diagnosis, and so that's a weird one.
It's a great. But like you said, when you were watching the replay, it looked pretty bad at first, just because it just seemed like he collapsed out of nowhere. For those who watched that and feared that the worst was on the horizon, this was a pretty good outcome. At least he's definitely going to be out like a week or two, probably longer than that ankle injury suffered by Trae Young, who I saw that one live, and I could have sworn that he was going to be out for weeks, but they're talking about days now. Yeah. So kind of a lucky break for Turner and for the Pacers as well. Yeah. In the short term, many people thought that rookie Goga Bitadze. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher that last name. I'm not sure. Bitadze. I'm not gonna sit on that one too long.
I butchered it last night too.
People were expecting him to take over some of those center minutes, but most of them went to Sabonis, who had a monster game. Goga only had 9 minutes off the bench, and it was really Doug McDermott and Justin Holiday who took on the bulk of Turner's missing minutes, playing small ball power forward, the both of them, or switching off with TJ Warren, who is pretty close to the same size as those two. So no real intriguing ads in my mind there. I had maybe Justin Holiday because of the defensive stats upside. But he needs a little more time than he's probably going to see to be relevant in standard leagues. And Doug McDermott, I mean, we all know what he is at this point. He's a 3-point shooter and a good one at that. But that's pretty much the end of the line in terms of what he can provide your fantasy team.
Yeah, for sure. And so in positive injury news, we have a much coveted player coming back. Should play his first game for the season tomorrow. We've got Kyle Kuzma making his debut. Likely making his debut tomorrow in Dallas for the Lakers. And I can address this one just because I'm on the Hoopball Lakers podcast. And so, so one of the interesting things we've talked about that one and where Kyle could fit in. I don't think the picture will be. I mean, obviously the picture won't be complete until Rondo comes back, but I envision Kyle being a really impactful scorer for that second unit. So as it stands right now, when that second unit is in, I think Anthony Davis is playing kind of out of default, and him being younger than LeBron, and so that's where the second unit is getting their scoring from. But I think there's going to come a point where Anthony Davis and LeBron sort of have to be on and off together, and that's where Kyle Kuzma will provide a huge boost, scoring off of the bench. I do feel like also when Rondo comes back, that's going to move Avery Bradley into the second unit, and because I feel like Rondo will provide a little bit more rebounding than Avery Bradley, while maybe not quite as good a defense. I think he'll run the offense a little bit better when he has to, and LeBron can play off the ball. And so I think it makes that second unit for the Lakers much, much deeper. Like it's adding 2 players, but those 2 players are going to be hugely impactful for that second unit. I think Kyle's going to be hugely important. Yeah.
How long do you think it'll take him to get up to speed? Because, I mean, it's a completely new team around him, and he's probably going to have sort of a different role than he had with last year's team, won't he?
That is the tricky thing, because I do also think at some point here really soon, the Lakers are going to start load managing AD and LeBron. You'd figure because LeBron is older, he should be first up for load management, but now Anthony Davis has that sore shoulder, and so I'm anticipating he's going to rest one of these next 2 games, either in Dallas or in San Antonio. Which it'll be a bummer if he rests against San Antonio because I'm actually going to that game. But I mean that in my recollection, I don't think NBA teams have like days in advance said when they're going to load manage somebody, but that's just my guess. Is sometime in the next 2 games, Anthony Davis is going to sit, and so that's only going to make the progress of Kyle and the whole team kind of fusing together take longer. But they're playing really well right now. I think Frank Vogel is okay with experimenting with the lineups and seeing what he's got and who can do what, and yeah.
Well, it'll be exciting to have him back in the fold, I'm sure, for Lakers fans. From a fantasy perspective, he is going to give you the points that you probably drafted him for. It's going to be a work in progress in the first couple of weeks, not only coming back from the injury, but meshing with the new players. So if you have him in a roto setting, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep him on your bench for his first handful of games until he really puts together a couple good games in a row. I think at that point it'd be safe to plug him back into your lineup, but you should definitely take a cautious approach with him while he builds himself back up.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I already forgot. I feel like that was the third thing. So we talked about the suspension and the injuries, and I feel like that was the third thing before we got to the box scores.
We got Steph and Miles Turner injuries as well. So I think we hit them all.
Okay.
Unless I think we got it.
Okay, I feel like there's one more thing, but yeah, I'm probably wrong. So yeah, a lot of interesting things to cover in the box scores for tonight. So that first game for Miami has that reputation for being one of the better organizations in the league. They've had a rough go of it the last few years drafting, but this year it seems like they hit on not only one but two guys. Kendrick Nunn was undrafted. He's been balling out so far this season. Tonight, he had 28 points, 2 steals, 2 rebounds, but he's scoring at an incredibly high clip. And Tyler Hero also chipped in off the bench with 17, made 3 threes, got a few rebounds, got a few assists, and a steal. What do you think of these two rookies from Miami?
So, I mean, yeah, the Kendrick Nunn story has been very impressive. He really rose to prominence during Summer League. He was putting up 25-point games on a night-to-night for that team. People were like, hey, you know what? This guy right here, undrafted, he could probably make a good case to compete for the last roster spot. He gets to training camp, still playing out of his mind. He put up 40 points in a preseason game, and then people are like, you know what? He might have a shot at getting into the rotation. Now we're 5 games into the season. Heat are 4-1, and Kendrick Nunn is the starting point guard, putting up near 30-point games. And this is just what Miami does, man. I mean, Josh Richardson was probably their latest example of a success with finding an undrafted guy.
Yeah.
Richardson's probably one of the more recent successful undrafted guys in the league, and he's a stellar defender. Kendrick Nunn seems to have a knack for slashing, and he also provides some pretty solid defense. So he's been a fantastic find, and we caught here at Hoopball, we definitely cautioned you all to wait and see what it looked like when Jimmy Butler was back in the fold. I think people were a little afraid that Nunn would be sent back to the bench, but he's still starting. He's played well next to Butler for 2 games, and I think he's just going to be a guy that's just going to have a place on your roster for the majority of the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jimmy Butler, and really odd night for Jimmy Butler tonight. Played 35 minutes, shot 2 for 10, only gave you 5 points. But he gave you 11 assists, 9 rebounds, 6 steals, and 3 blocks.
That is
his plus minus
line.
was plus 21. And yeah, I mean maybe, and that's kind of the thing you hear about Heat culture and all that, and maybe Jimmy Butler's buying into it. And yeah, I mean they won, so presumably he's satisfied with the win. But for him to only score 5 points, but to still do all that, and presumably be happy for Kendrick Nunn. I've heard that he gets along really, really well with Tyler Hero.
Yeah.
And so it's weird that Jimmy Butler might have finally found his happy place in Miami.
It kind of, that grinding culture that you hear about out of Miami, it definitely seems like it fits him like a glove, and he really gets to, the poor shooting to start off the season. People shouldn't be concerned that he's just going to drop off offensively, because this is basically him ramping himself up to speed like all these guys got to do in the preseason. So that shot's definitely going to fall. He definitely looks like he's fitting right in with this team's identity, though. These guys it's a very good complementary set of guys. The defense on this team, both interior and on the perimeter, looks above average. And look, that is a beautiful fantasy line. I'm just like, it's incredible all the stuff that he was able to do in this game. The only knocks aside from the scoring are the 4 turnovers, and he missed one of his 2 free throws, I guess. But you will take. I doubt that he's going to get that high assist numbers on a night-to-night basis. But if Kendrick Nunn is feeling it, I think Butler has proven that he's more than capable of distributing the ball to his teammates and finding the right guy, especially your Tyler Heroes, who is just having a monster season offensively for this team, both off the bench and in the starting lineup.
Yeah, for sure. Over on Atlanta, we talked about so that Trae Young is going to be out for a little while, and who's really going to pick up the pace for Atlanta while he's out? And it's hard to say who. I mean, DeAndre Hunter is a rookie, but he's been having a pretty good year so far. But you can't really expect him to do it. seems like the most seasoned veteran aside from Vince Carter might be Jabari Parker, and tonight he was their leader, 23 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. But anything else in Atlanta that kind of jump out at you?
Yeah, so the Hawks, I think this is a real interesting stretch for them. I mean, it's a huge relief to this team that Trae Young is going to be in the fold. He's only going to miss a few more games. So it's really going to, the story on them this year is just that it's just been the Trae Young and John Collins show on offense with a little bit of Jabari sprinkled in. The questions persisted. Who else on this team can get a bucket? When you look, I mean, Jabari Parker putting up 23 points in this game isn't all that surprising to me because, I mean, he's definitely had it going early on. I think that his ability to score from different places on the floor was really helpful for a team just looking for shot creators tonight. I don't think that he's necessarily makes the most sense as an ad. Maybe while Trae Young is out, you can ride him for a game or two because he'll probably still continue to score. But if you're looking for someone to pick up while Trae is out, it's probably going to be DeAndre Bembry, who has played has done some ball handling over the last couple of years, and tonight he was just really good in that role with 18 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, and a couple of steals. He's not going to be that good on most nights, even if he's going to be having this huge role now. But I think that he's the ad if you're looking for one in the fallout of the Trae Young injury.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. Moving on to Denver at New Orleans. This game's about to wrap up, and New Orleans is up by 16, and there's less than 90 seconds left. So this is pretty much over. You can go ahead and take the lead on this one as far as what jumps out at you.
So I guess we'll start with Denver, who has been. This team is great in real life for how balanced they are across the roster, but very frustrating from a fantasy perspective for that exact reason. You never know who's going to have the hot hand or who's going to guarantee you production aside from Nikola Jokic on a night-to-night basis. And tonight, he wasn't even all that spectacular for his standards. Only 13 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists in 27 minutes played. Just looking up and down this box score right now, none of these lines are all that. None of them really jump off the page to you, and it's got to be frustrating if you invested a top pick in a Jamal Murray, or if you were kind of hoping for more out of Gary Harris this season, because those guys continue to be they continue to feel the Malik Beasleys of the world and the Monte Morrises. Just these two guys are such quality backups that they are able to get low to mid 20 minutes a night and really take away from those two guys. Another interesting note here is that Michael Porter Jr. made his NBA debut in this game, and he wasn't bad. Yeah. He put up 13 points on 4 of 7 shooting in 20 minutes played. He had 4 rebounds and an assist. Really a solid start for a guy who's been sidelined for an entire year. And the reason that that's sort of interesting, and I'm not going to get too carried away because he's a rookie with an injury history and he's got a lot to learn, but the one weak spot on this Denver Nuggets roster is their small forward position. Mm-hmm. That's the spot that has the most ramp up for a guy to sort of like grab the reins, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So in reality, Porter Jr. is probably just going to make it a much more complicated mess. You're competing with your Torrey Craigs and your you have Juan Hernan Gomez and Will Barton, who I believe sat this game out, which probably so it's still a mess, but great for Michael Porter Jr. It's a great start for him, and
yeah,
he's now up to 15 points to finish. The game just went final. He finished with 15 now on 5 of 8 shooting.
Yeah, I was laughing because so I've got a DraftKings lineup, mm-hmm. and it's pretty close. I'm in the money, but it's pretty close. And one of my guys is Josh Hart, and I was looking at him dribbling the clock out, and I'm like, shit, he's going to get a turnover. But at the last second, he handed it to Jackson Hayes. And Jackson Hayes even kind of looked at him like, what the hell, man?
He just stuck him with the turnover.
Yeah.
I think that's just cold, man.
Yeah, because there was still a shot clock going on, but there was no need for them to shoot. And Yeah, that's always a fun game. I like watching at the end of games. Is like who doesn't want the turnover, and yeah,
Yeah, but Jackson Hayes, that he can handle it. He's low usage. He's not going to have many of those. So,
yeah,
Jock, yeah, you can take one for the team. You're a rookie.
yeah.
So while do you have any other thoughts on the Nuggets before we pivot to the Pelicans here?
No, just a really balanced attack. I think the Nuggets and the Jazz are going to be really similar teams in that I forgot how somebody coined the term, but basically like elite with no all stars. That's pretty much
Yeah.
what Utah and Denver are going to be. Although Vince Carter might get that. Vince Carter might get that honorary All Star like Dirk and Dwayne did last year.
Man, that's really not outside the realm of possibilities. You gotta figure there's probably gonna be one or two guys too that just go down, and in the Eastern Conference, there's gonna be like, well, damn, who else do we plug in here?
Yeah,
I guess Vince.
yeah. And then yeah. Oh, did you talk about New Orleans yet? You can lead that too.
So yeah, diving into New Orleans here, who got Drew Holiday back tonight. He had an okay game shooting wise. Well, aside from the shooting, he had 19 points on this one with only 7 of 17 from the floor. He's likely going to pick that back up once he gets a little more back to speed. And he rounded out the rest of his line with 7 assists, 5 rebounds, and 2 steals. Elsewhere on this roster, you have your big popcorn game out of Jahlil Okafor, who had 26 points and had an impressive 10 from 13 from the line. He's not a super appealing also had 3 defensive stats, by the way, 2 steals and a block. He's not the most intriguing ad out there because we sort of know what his ceiling is. We don't figure for Derek Favors to miss that much more time, and so Okafor's going to go back to the bench and probably not get much more than maybe maximum 20 minutes a night. And I don't think that he's going to hit that point either. It was It was a nice game from Brandon Ingram, who has, I think, with Zion injury and then Drew and Favors going down, he's gotten a lot of opportunity to sort of hone his skills as the go-to guy on this team. He finished with 25 points, 7 of 12 from the field, 9 out of 11 from the line with a couple of threes, 5 assists, and 3 rebounds. Do you have any thoughts on how some of these Laker guys have looked so far with this Pelicans team? And it's hard to say because of the injuries, but how do you see their development so far?
I'm impressed with Brandon Ingram just because even when he was drafted and I didn't pay as much attention to the Lakers because LeBron wasn't on there. I didn't like his build, so I didn't know how well his game would translate. And although he's still incredibly skinny and has no bulk to his frame, he's still manages to be an effective scorer. So I've been impressed by that. Impressed with Lonzo. Impressed that he's improved his jumper. He's still kind of that all around stat gatherer. Tonight being the exception with Josh Hart, tonight he didn't have a very good night tonight, but he's had a really good start to his season, and he was somebody I was hoping the Lakers have been able to kind of finagle and sort of keep him out of trade talks and them sort of get away with keeping Kuzma and Hart because I really liked him last year. I liked his defensive effort and he was fairly reliable from 3, and so that he seems to only be a little bit better at that and this season. So yeah, I feel like they've developed well. The Lakers aren't really an organization that focuses on developing young talent. They like acquiring veterans and like being in the mix. And New Orleans seems to be focusing on the developing of talent. And so yeah, I think they're doing well.
Yeah, and Lonzo Ball, by the way, the all-around stats numbers have really floated his value so far this season. He's been a top 40 player. Tonight might bump him down just a little bit from that mark, but he's definitely exceeded expectations after some people were expressing some concern that he might struggle to find a good set of minutes on this team with all the different guards that they could roll out there. He seems to be settling in as the starting point guard for this team, and the fact that his jumper does look better actually does. I think that does matter. Anyone who can go out there and not be a liability on the perimeter, you stay on the floor for longer. You can hit those 30-minute thresholds like that. I'm pretty encouraged from what I've seen from him so far. The one guy I'm not super thrilled about, and I wasn't during draft season, and I'm still not now, is JJ Redick. He only had 17 minutes in this game. He has struggled. He hasn't. He's just really struggled out the gate with this team, and a lot of it's been his poor shooting, which is going to come up at some point. He's also averaging a good chunk of turnovers. I think 3 a game heading into this night. He is teetering on drop territory. I think that you give him a little more time. If you can hold him at the end of your bench, I think that's a solid move for the time being. I mean, I doubt that you're starting him with the way he's playing, but the whole too many mouths to feed thing that I was afraid about hurting Lonzo Ball really seems to be taking a toll on JJ Redick.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. It seemed like he was more interested in kind of being, assisting with the development, being that sort of veteran for the young guys, and that really might be the bulk of his role this season.
Yeah. So, tonight did not provide much optimism for hoping that he could turn a corner. But we still do know what this guy is, especially when it comes to three-pointers and free throws. He could be a guy that can really float your team in some of those values. But if he's not getting the minutes, and he's been averaging 25 a night up until this 17-minute game, so I'm not concerned that he's necessarily losing time, but he's definitely losing touches out there. And especially when he's not hitting his shots, it's going to be real tough to roster him.
Yeah, he's definitely not the safest bet you can make. Speaking of bets, we have another sponsor that, that's a segue. I'm a professional. So we have another sponsor, mybookie.ag. You can place your next bet at mybookie.ag, our online betting partner here at Hoopball. You can sign up for a new account and use promo code TODAY. That's the word TODAY. TODAY, and MyBookie will match your first deposit up to $1,000. I haven't had a chance to use this site yet, but I've jumped on other sites that match the deposit, and man, that's a huge bump up, especially if you're not willing to invest a whole bunch of money, or if you start with 50 and they match your deposit. Now you've got 100 to start with. That's big time. And so, yeah, MyBookie.ag. Sports betting is becoming more and more legal, and I think, to me, I think it's a fun way to sort of enhance the entertainment. I'm somebody who gambles on sports a lot. I never gamble a ton of money. Like I'm not Mattress Mac or anything. It's usually $10 here, $25 here. I'll try to make a big money play on a parlay and like try to pick 3 games correct at once, and if all 3 hit, that's pretty decent payout. Things like that. Do you gamble on sports?
Nah, not particularly. I mean, I guess my gambling is mostly limited to season-long fantasy, and I started getting into some DFS last season. But yeah. I've never really been one to bet on outcomes and spreads and stuff, betting like that.
Yeah, I've got a crazy bad beat story from last year Dwayne Wade is a player that I've loved since he's been in the league, and will always love him. But last season I was in Las Vegas, and I had a 3-team parlay, and I nailed the first 2 games, and it basically boiled down to a money line. Money line meaning for the Warriors, all they had to do was win the game. Mm-hmm. And this is when Dwayne Wade hit the game winner against Golden State. Man, I could not believe he hit that.
Was that the one where he jumped up on the scorer's table and like did "this is my house" sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I could have won like $200, and on Twitter I'll tweet at him every now and then still and say I love him, but like I love you, but you owe me $200. Yeah, it's weird. He's a player I like so much, but I'm never gonna get over that, like, ever.
Yeah. That's pretty crushing, I gotta say. Yeah. That's part of why I've tried to avoid it, is because, like, I at least when it comes to like gambling on like teams that I try and follow, I don't want to be sitting there and be stewing in anger because my team hits a game winner and they end up not covering the spread somehow. Yeah, I clearly don't know what I'm talking about with gambling. I don't know if that made any sense. I promise I could do fantasy basketball, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
not my realm.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the last game, which is it's about to wrap up the third quarter, so we're obviously not going to get to finish. But it's the Spurs at Clippers. Clippers right now have a 5 point lead, 68-73 in favor of the Clippers. Hard to say because the game isn't complete, but Kawhi is being Kawhi. He's
Naturally.
leading the Clippers. 21 points, 10 rebounds, uh, 2 steals, 1 block. Made 1 3, 4 free throws. Montrezl Harrell's the other Clipper who's leading the way. 16 points off the bench, 7 of 9 field goals. Anything else jump out at you for the Clippers?
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Patterson has 9 rebounds. That's kind of cool. Don't pick him up anywhere if anyone's listening to this. The real story on the Clippers in the early goings here, and obviously this is going to be a much different team once Paul George sort of settles in. But in his absence, we've all been kind of wondering like who is going to be the guy that sort of takes on his minutes and provides some fantasy value while he misses the first 10 to 15 games, however long it's supposed to be. And we just haven't seen anyone with any sort of consistency there. I think Mo Harkless, who's long been a man of interest here at Hoop Ball, I think speculation was that he would sort of get to that mid 20-minute mark and get you your smattering of defensive stats with some rebounds and maybe a 3 or 2. But he hasn't been really doing much of that. He's only had 11 minutes in tonight's game with 8 points and 4 rebounds and a steal. The story for this team is that there are no real – you don't really know who to trust on a night-to-night basis for the fringe guys. You obviously know to trust Kawhi when he's playing. You obviously know to trust Montrezl Harrell. You probably have Lou Williams rostered, even though he's not my favorite fantasy guy. But those three are going to be handling the bulk of – those are the 3 guys you can bet on consistency from, and pretty much everywhere else on the roster, it's who knows on a night-to-night.
Yeah, for sure. And the Spurs I've always maintained are a hard team to, at least daily fantasy wise, are a hard team to kind of peg because it seems like on a different night, different people are going to take over. Like DeMar DeRozan is not the lights out scorer he used to be in this system. He sort of seems to defer to whoever the hot hand is. And like tonight, he happens to be the hot hand, but there are some nights where LaMarcus will be really hot, DeJounte might be really hot, and so you never know who really is going to perform super well for the Spurs. But tonight so far, you've got 17 out of DeMar, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal, but only 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for LaMarcus. But yeah, what else jumps out at you for San Antonio?
Well, let's see. On the DeMar thing, he's been struggling in fantasy leagues this year. He's been ranked heading into this game, he's ranked 135 in non-cat leagues. And the big thing that jumps out the page to me is not the shooting percentages, which is usually what you point to when a guy of his caliber is struggling this much. He is turning the ball over a ton. Tonight's no different. He has 5 turnovers in this game. He's averaging 3.3 on the season. But the assist numbers that he was enjoying last year, he averaged I think it was either at or near 6 assists a game. They haven't been there this year. He's only at 2.5. Tonight he has 2. So I mean, it's really kind of he's sort of settled into a different kind of player through these first few games here, and he's clearly going to be better than the top 135 in fantasy leagues. But I think the return of DeJounte Murray, the soaking up those ball handling minutes between him and Patty Mills and Derek White has sort of left DeMar to being this sort of off-ball player, not what he was last year. And that could be a long-term concern with his outlook on the season. I think that he's going to be a top 100 player, but it can't be ignored through the small sample size that we have so far that he just looks like he's playing a different role with this team. So that's one thing that's definitely apparent here. The point guard battle is still ongoing. DeJounte Murray, he's not having the best game in this one. He's at 4 points, 5 rebounds, and he's still in that minutes limit. Derek White's got 13 on 4-7 shooting with 2 assists, 3 rebounds, and a couple of threes. And 3 defensive stats. looks like he's going to be the hot hand going down the stretch here as the third quarter is coming to a close. And yeah, I mean, you said it yourself. The Spurs play to matchups, so it's kind of hard to trust them on a consistent basis with like who's going to get what on a given night. But I think the big takeaway is that DeMar DeRozan seems to be playing differently, or at least be in a different role with this team, and that could have some long-term ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. I know me personally, it'd be nice if Bryn Forbes and LaMarcus could start to play better because that would benefit me greatly. But,
Uh, yeah. And Rudy Gay, by the way, interesting line from this one. Through 22 minutes, he's shooting the ball terribly, 3 of 10 from the floor, but he's already got 11 rebounds and 4 assists, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's been a rough start on the year, but he was a top 100 fantasy player last year. If he's floating around on your wire, and he's not an intriguing ad, I'm not really going to suggest that you go out and get him, but I see him as a guy who could possibly turn something around here.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's going to about do it for the Halloween edition of the Box Score Breakdown. If you're listening to this, whenever you're listening to this, I hope you had a safe and good and nice Halloween. Yeah. Anything you want to say, or where can the people follow you on social medias?
Yeah, if you guys want to continue the conversation on social media, please give me a follow at Alan Sroki, my name. That's ALANSROCHI. I'll actually take a page from Dan Bespers's book here, and if you Google Alan at Hoopball, you can help find my last name. I have an equally terrible last name for this sort of thing. So, yeah, give me a follow at Alan Sroki at Twitter.
Cool. Yeah, and you can find me at JCDeleon1, JCDELEON, and the number 1. You can also find me there on Instagram as well. At Instagram, I repost a lot of mostly LeBron-related things, but also a lot of sneaker things. I'm a big sneakerhead, and so yeah, that's what I'm good for on Instagram. Also, I'm a big movie buff. I don't know if that would affect anybody's interest or not. But yeah, that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Box Score Breakdown. And we are out.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.